When the Kingston family mocked the black wife at their golden anniversary, they had no idea she owned the company they were celebrating. Crystal lights poured down, scattering across the sparkling champagne glasses. Soft music floated through the grand ballroom of the Grand Manhattan Hotel, the glamorous venue for the 50th anniversary gala of Kingston Enterprises, a prestigious real estate empire run by the Kingston family for 3 generations. Amid the crowd of tuxedos and glittering gowns, Lydia Brooks, the only black woman in the room, sat quietly beside her husband, Daniel Kingston, the youngest son of the family. Her calm smile was so serene that most mistook it for weakness. Margaret Kingston, her mother-in-law, leaned toward her with a sweet but icy tone. "Dear, did you bring your own food again? Our menu might be a little too sophisticated for your taste." Laughter erupted around the table. Daniel lowered his head. No one said a word in her defense. Lydia gently placed her silverware down, lifted her face, and kept that same unreadable smile. In that polished world of high society, while every gaze was laced with disdain, Lydia said nothing. She simply swirled the wine in her glass with quiet grace. No one knew that behind that smile, a plan had already been set in motion. And tonight, right at this very table, the history of the Kingston Empire would take a turn it could never come back from. Lydia Brooks, or Lydia Kingston, as everyone at the party reluctantly called her, was born in Atlanta, in a neighborhood where every penny came with sweat. Her father was a mechanic, her mother an elementary school teacher. No one there would have believed that the small black girl with bright eyes would one day walk into the center of New York's financial world. Lydia was not only smart, but she had the instincts of a strategist. After graduating from Wharton, she became a financial analyst at one of Wall Street's top investment banks. There, surrounded by expensive suits and skeptical glances, Lydia learned that real power was never in words. It was in numbers. 3 years ago, she met Daniel Kingston, the youngest son of the Kingston dynasty. He was kind, gentle, and so different from the cold arrogance of the rest of the family. They married quickly, and Lydia left her banking career behind, believing that love could melt prejudice. But she was wrong. The Kingston family welcomed her with polite smiles that soon turned into poisoned words. Edward Kingston, her father-in-law and the CEO of the company, always boasted that a Kingston has never made a mistake when choosing an heir. Margaret, her mother-in-law, was the embodiment of old-fashioned arrogance. She never called Lydia by her name, only dear, as if the name Lydia was not worthy of being spoken in their house. Victoria and James, her brother and sister-in-law, treated her like a blemish that had tainted their pure upper-class bloodline. Every dinner felt like a trial, where Lydia was the entertainment. "So, Lydia," someone would sneer, "does your family even celebrate Christmas?" Or the mocking laughter would ring out, "Daniel, I still do not understand how you ended up marrying her." She never argued. She never raised her voice. She simply watched and remembered. Every smirk, every cruel joke. Because while they saw a quiet woman, she was seeing the pieces of a plan falling into place. Her silence was not submission, it was the calm before the storm. 3 hours before the gala, in the quiet of her hotel suite, Lydia stood by the window overlooking the glowing lights of Manhattan. She held her phone, opened a message that had been saved in her drafts for months. Just 4 words. Execute Protocol B. She pressed send. No one in the Kingston family had any idea that the woman they had belittled for so long was not some unemployed housewife. Lydia was the anonymous founder of Eclipse Capital Partners, a private equity firm that owned 34% of Kingston Enterprises. 7 years ago, Lydia established the firm under the name of her late grandfather, Edward Brooks Sr., a former accountant who once told her, "If you want respect, let the numbers speak for you." While everyone thought she was just scrolling the internet at night, she was actually managing an investment portfolio worth $3.2 billion. Step by step, she quietly bought up Kingston shares through intermediaries, never once drawing suspicion. She understood the market as if it was her own heartbeat. A single move of capital could shake an entire financial ecosystem, yet she had never used that power for herself. She had only been waiting for the right reason. And tonight, right at this very table, the history of the Kingston Empire would take a turn it could never come back from. The clinking of glasses echoed like a signal marking the beginning of a tragedy. Edward Kingston, silver-haired in a perfectly tailored black suit, stood at the center of the stage, holding a microphone with the confidence of a king. 50 years of legacy, he declared, and with Eclipse Capital renewing its $1.4 billion investment, Kingston Enterprises stands stronger than ever. The entire ballroom erupted in applause. Margaret smiled triumphantly, glancing at Lydia with a look that seemed to say, "Do you see this? This is real power." Matthew, their cousin, the company's chief financial officer, smirked and joked, "Funny thing, though, we have never actually met the person behind Eclipse Capital. Whoever they are, they must trust us completely." Laughter rippled through the room, until Lydia set her glass down. The sound of crystal touching the table was small, yet impossibly clear amid the noise. She rose to her feet, took a few steps forward, and spoke in a calm voice that sent chills down every spine. "Sometimes, the ones you underestimate the most are the ones signing your paychecks." The words cut through the air like a blade. The room froze. Awkward laughter fluttered and died. No one at the table understood what Lydia meant, but the audience, the ones watching the story unfold, could feel it clearly. The storm had begun to rise. The next morning, the New York Times ran a headline: "Kingston Enterprises plunges 70% overnight. Eclipse Capital founder revealed as Lydia Brooks Kingston." The stock continued to fall. Investors fled. The Department of Justice launched an emergency investigation into racial discrimination and internal fraud. Within 48 hours, the board of directors forced Edward Kingston to resign. Victoria lost all advertising and credits. James was suspended from executive authority. The lavish dinner parties that once overflowed with laughter were now replaced by unanswered phone calls. Daniel found a white envelope on his desk. Divorce papers. No claims, no demands. Just one handwritten line: "I do not want anything that came from disrespect." On television, Lydia appeared in an exclusive interview. The camera zoomed in on her calm eyes. No hatred, no bitterness. Only truth. "This is not revenge," she said slowly. "This is accountability. I simply documented the truth they gave me." The audience fell silent. Millions of people, people of color, women, anyone who had ever been underestimated saw themselves reflected in her words. A woman who had stayed silent for 3 years now stood up not for vengeance, but for dignity. Lydia's justice did not come from a courtroom. It came from strength, from knowing when to stay silent and when to speak after there was nothing left to lose. That night, she returned to the small apartment where she had once started. She opened her laptop and looked at her investment portfolio glowing green. Everything that had once been taken from her had been returned, not through hatred, but through brilliance. Justice doesn't need swords or vengeance. It only needs truth, and someone patient enough to wait for it to be heard. 6 months later, Forbes released a special edition with a photograph of Lydia standing in front of the glass headquarters of Eclipse Capital. The bold headline read, "The Black Woman Who Turned Humiliation into a $4 billion Empire." From a woman who was mocked at a dinner table, Lydia had become a symbol of intelligence, resilience, and courage. She founded the Eclipse Foundation, a $50 million fund dedicated to helping Black entrepreneurs start businesses in finance and real estate. 25 former Kingston employees who had faced discrimination were invited back to work, now with fair pay and a workplace where their voices truly mattered. Across the city, the once glorious Kingston family faded into silence. The ancestral mansion was repossessed by the bank. Edward was under investigation for fraud. Margaret was expelled from the social clubs that once worshipped her as royalty. Victoria lost all brand endorsements. And James lived quietly in a small rented apartment, staring at the divorce papers where Lydia had written one final line. "You could have defended me. You chose silence." Those words echoed like the final bell, not just for a marriage, but for an entire era where privilege was mistaken for truth. Lydia never set out to destroy the Kingston Empire. She simply built